She was paid $5,000 to go on one date. Just one night. Sit down, have dinner, and leave. By Sunday night, she was holding his hand in the dark, telling him secrets she'd never told anyone. And by Monday morning, when she walked away, neither of them would ever be the same. Welcome to Diaries of Love. Hey, everyone. I appreciate every single one of you for clicking on this. I know we all have busy schedules, and you chose to spend your time here with me, and that means everything. As you watch this story, let the universe bring peace to your heart tonight. Let it remind you that love shows up when we least expect it, sometimes disguised as something else entirely. Please stay until the very end. And when you're done, tell me what time it is where you are and where you're watching from in the comments. I read every single one. Subscribe if you believe in love. I love you all. Now, let me tell you about Denise and Robert. So picture this. A small apartment in the city. Two girls, two completely different personalities, sharing one space and somehow making it work. Betty Green was the life of every room she walked into. Loud. Confident. The kind of woman who walked into a bar alone and walked out with 5 new friends and a phone full of numbers. Betty didn't do quiet. She didn't do still. She was always moving, always laughing, always chasing something exciting. And then there was Denise. Denise R. Tannenbaum, Betty's best friend. Her sister in every way that mattered. But Denise? Denise was the opposite. She was the woman curled up on the couch with a book while Betty was out dancing until 3 a.m. She loved rainy days. She loved silence. She loved the kind of peace that most people don't even know exists. They were oil and water. But somehow, together, they worked. Until 3 months ago, when Denise's world fell apart. She lost her job. Budget cuts, they said. Nothing personal. But when you're the one walking out of that office with a box of your things and the whole floor watching you, it feels very, very personal. And for Denise, someone whose pride was everything to her, someone who paid her own way and stood on her own 2 feet, losing that job wasn't just financial. It was identity. It was everything she believed about herself, crumbling. The rejection emails started piling up. One after another after another. And every single one felt like a door slamming in her face. But Betty never once made her feel small. Every month, Betty covered her half of the rent. She did it quietly. She slid the money across the table like it was nothing, like it was just what you do for the people you love. And Denise took it because she had no choice, but every single dollar burned. Denise was drowning, and she didn't know how to ask for a life raft. Until one Tuesday night, when Betty came home with something different in her eyes. Betty sat down across from Denise at the kitchen table, poured 2 glasses of wine, and said, "I need to talk to you about something." Denise looked up. She could tell by Betty's face that this wasn't going to be a normal conversation. "You know what I do on the side," Betty said. Denise nodded slowly. She knew. Betty's side hustle wasn't a secret between them. Betty escorted people. She went on dates with men who needed company. Sometimes it was just dinner. Sometimes it was an event. Sometimes men paid her to pretend to be their girlfriend for a night, to show up at a family dinner, to make them look good in front of people who mattered. It was professional. It was harmless. And it paid very, very well. "I got a request," Betty said, leaning forward. "And I can't take it. But I think you should." Denise's eyebrows went up. "Me? Betty, I've never done anything like that." "I know. That's why I'm telling you the details first." Betty took a breath. "His name is Robert Moyer. The request is simple. 1 dinner date. That's it. You sit down, you talk to him, you have a meal. If at any point you feel uncomfortable, you get up and you leave. And here's the thing, Denise. The $5,000? That's yours no matter what. Non-refundable. Even if you leave after 10 minutes. Denise stared at her. $5,000, she repeated, for 1 dinner. "Betty, just hear him out. That's all I'm asking. He seems boring, honestly. Not my type at all. But Denise, you need this. And I need to know you're okay." There was a long silence. Denise looked down at her hands. She thought about the rejection emails. She thought about the rent money sliding across the table. She thought about how tired she was of feeling like she was disappearing. And she said, "Okay. Now, let's talk about Robert Moyer." If you looked at Robert on the outside, you wouldn't think twice about him. He was quiet. He wore glasses. He dressed simply. He walked into rooms and people's eyes just slid right past him. He was the kind of man who could sit at a party for an hour and nobody would notice he was there. But here's the thing about Robert. The things you can't see, those were extraordinary. Robert was a private investor. Had been for years. He invested in technology companies before most people even knew what they were. He made money quietly, invisibly, and he liked it that way. No social media. No public profile. No interviews. Robert lived in the shadows of his own success, and he preferred it. But loneliness doesn't care how much money you have. Robert had been trying to date. He really had. But every single date was a disaster. One girl laughed at him because he didn't have Instagram. Another told him he should find a real job, which was funny because Robert could have bought her entire apartment building without blinking. Another one spent the whole dinner scrolling her phone, barely looking up, nodding every few seconds like she was listening but wasn't. The problem wasn't that Robert was boring. The problem was that most of the women he was meeting didn't want conversation. They wanted spectacle. And Robert wanted someone who could match him. Someone who could keep up. Someone who would look at him and actually see him. He hadn't found that person yet. And then, 3 months before this story really begins, everything got worse. Robert had a girlfriend, Chelsea. They'd been together for a while. And Robert had a cousin named Alex. Alex was practically his brother. They'd grown up together. Robert trusted him with everything. So when Robert came home one evening and found Alex and Chelsea together in his apartment in his bedroom, the betrayal wasn't just romantic. It was personal. It was family. It was the deepest kind of cut. Chelsea looked at him with tears in her eyes and said she was sorry. Alex couldn't even look at him at all. Robert didn't yell. He didn't scream. He just said, very quietly, "Get out." And they did. But here's where it gets cruel. Because Alex wasn't just sleeping with Chelsea behind Robert's back. Alex was falling in love with her. Or at least, that's what he told everyone. And 2 weeks later, Alex announced he was marrying Chelsea. A big, lavish, society wedding. The kind of wedding that makes the papers. Robert's wedding was supposed to happen in 3 months. Now it was Alex's. And Robert's mother called him 3 times. Every single day. "Robert, you have to come to this wedding. If you don't show up, people will talk. They'll pity you. Is that what you want?" What Robert wanted was to disappear. What Robert wanted was to never see Alex or Chelsea again. But his mother had built an empire after his father died, and when she asked you to do something, you did it. So Robert was going to that wedding, whether he liked it or not. But he wasn't going alone. His best friend Nate sat him down a week before the wedding and said, "You are not walking into that church looking like a man who just got his heart ripped out." "Nate, I don't care. I care. You're my best friend, and I'm not letting Alex win this. I already made arrangements." Robert looked at him. "What kind of arrangements?" "I hired someone. A professional. Her name is Betty. The dinner date is $10,000. If she goes to the wedding with you for the full weekend, it's $40,000 total. You just need someone on your arm who makes you look like you've moved on. Like you're better off. Like you won." Robert didn't want to do it. It felt pathetic. It felt like admitting defeat. But Nate was right. Robert couldn't walk into that wedding alone. Not with Chelsea standing at the altar. Not with Alex looking smug. Not with his entire family watching. So he agreed. What Robert didn't know was that Betty wasn't coming. Denise was. The restaurant wasn't fancy. It wasn't one of those places where the menu doesn't have prices and the waiters judge you for ordering the wrong wine. It was comfortable. Warm. The kind of place where you could actually hear yourself think. Denise walked in, and her heart was hammering. She'd put on jeans and a leather jacket. Casual. Easy. She wanted to look like she wasn't trying too hard because the truth was, she was terrified. This was so far outside her comfort zone that she almost turned around twice on the way there. but $5,000. Non-refundable. She spotted him at a corner table by the window. And when Robert Moyer looked up at her, something happened that neither of them expected. He smiled. Not a big smile. Not a confident, charming smile. It was small. A little nervous. A little hopeful. Like he was genuinely surprised that she showed up. Like he'd been expecting to eat dinner alone. Denise walked over, sat down, and said, "Robert."
Denise.
"Hi." He stood up too fast, almost knocked his water over, and sat back down, embarrassed. "Thank you for coming. I know this is a little weird."
"A little," she said.
And then, because she could see how nervous he was, she added, "But weird isn't always bad." He looked at her like she'd just said the most interesting thing anyone had ever said to him. And maybe she had. They started slow. Safe. The weather. The menu. What they usually ordered at restaurants. Normal, boring, first date stuff. But then Robert mentioned a book he was reading. Something about behavioral economics. Something about the way human beings make decisions when money is involved. And Denise's whole face changed. "Wait," she said, leaning forward. "You're reading Kahneman?" Robert blinked. "You know Kahneman?" "I wrote my graduate thesis on cognitive bias in financial markets. I basically lived inside that book for 2 years." And just like that, everything shifted. They started really talking. Not small talk. Real talk. The kind of conversation that makes you forget where you are. They talked about art. About politics. About the way the global economy was shifting and what it meant for the next generation. They talked about video games, of all things, and discovered they both loved strategy, and they argued about it, genuinely argued, and it was the most fun Denise had had in months. Robert was different from every person she'd ever met. He didn't try to impress her. He didn't talk over her. He didn't pull out his phone once. He just listened. He asked questions. He challenged her ideas, not to tear them down, but because he actually wanted to understand her better. And Denise? Denise wasn't performing anymore. She'd walked in there thinking this was a job, a transaction. Sit, eat, leave, collect the money. But somewhere between the appetizer and the main course, she forgot about the money entirely. Hours passed. Neither of them noticed. "It's almost midnight," Denise said, checking her phone, genuinely shocked. "No way," Robert said. And then he looked at his watch, and his eyes went wide. "We've been talking for 3 hours. I was supposed to stay an hour." "I'm sorry." "Don't be," Denise said. And she meant it. "I haven't had a conversation like this I honestly can't remember how long." They looked at each other across that table. And something was there. Something small and quiet and dangerous. Robert cleared his throat. "Denise, I know this is technically a business arrangement, but would you consider coming to the wedding? I know it's a lot to ask, but I would really like to spend more time with you." Denise, who had walked into that restaurant ready to run, found herself saying yes. They met again on Tuesday. A small cafe this time. Coffee instead of wine. And this time, the task was different. They weren't just spending time together. They were building a story. Because if Denise was going to pretend to be Robert's girlfriend at this wedding, they needed to be convincing. They needed details. How they met. How long they'd been together. The little things that couples just know about each other. "So, how did we meet?" Robert asked, stirring his coffee. "We met at a bookstore," Denise said without hesitation. Robert smiled. "I like that. What was I buying?" "A first edition of something ridiculously obscure that you absolutely did not need to spend that much money on." "And what did you do?" "I told you that you were being ridiculous." "And what did I do?" "You bought me coffee to prove you weren't." They laughed. It was easy. Comfortable. Like they were writing a story together, not rehearsing a lie. 3 months, they decided. They'd been together for 3 months. Long enough to be serious. Short enough to explain why Robert's family hadn't met her yet. They went through the details. Favorite restaurants. How they spent weekends. What they argued about. Robert told her things about his family she'd need to know. His mother. His uncles. The cousins. Alex. Chelsea. And Denise listened to every word, memorizing it all. Not just because she needed to for the performance, but because she genuinely wanted to understand this man's life. At one point, Robert looked at her and said, quietly, "You know, this is supposed to feel weird, rehearsing all of this. But it doesn't." "No," Denise agreed. "It doesn't." Neither of them said what they were both thinking. Saturday morning. Denise was ready by 9. She'd packed a small bag.
Kept it simple.
She didn't know what to expect, and she didn't want to assume anything. When she stepped outside, she stopped. Parked in front of her building was a car that looked like it belonged in a museum. A 1954 Mercedes-Benz 300 SL Gullwing.
Silver.
Pristine. The kind of car that made people stop walking just to stare at it. Robert was leaning against it, hands in his pockets, looking almost shy about it, like he knew exactly how it looked and was a little embarrassed. "Is that yours?" Denise asked. "It was my father's," Robert said. "I've kept it exactly the way he left it." He opened the gullwing door for her, that famous door that swings up like a wing. And Denise slid inside, and the leather was worn and soft, and it smelled like old wood and history, and she thought, this man carries his father with him everywhere he goes. They drove out of the city as the morning sun climbed higher, through roads that curved and twisted through trees that were turning gold. And Denise watched the landscape change, watched the buildings disappear and the open space appear, and she started to get a feeling that she was about to see something she wasn't prepared for. And she was right. They drove over a hill, and there it was, the Moyer estate. It was enormous. A sprawling mansion surrounded by manicured gardens and old stone walls, and the kind of quiet that only comes with serious, generational wealth. It was beautiful. It was intimidating. And it was absolutely nothing like anywhere Denise had ever been. She stared at it for a long moment. Then she looked at Robert. "Robert," she said very calmly, "what exactly do you do?" Robert rubbed the back of his neck. "I invest in technology companies." Quietly. "This," Denise said, gesturing at the estate, "is not quiet." "My mother built most of it," he said. "After my father died, everyone told her to sell. She didn't. She took what he'd started and she turned it into something massive. She's formidable." Denise nodded slowly. She took a breath. She straightened her spine. And she thought, "I am not going to let this intimidate me. I belong anywhere I choose to belong." And she walked into that house like she owned it. Robert's mother was exactly what you'd expect from a woman who built an empire out of grief. Elegant. Sharp. The kind of woman who could read a room in 3 seconds and had already decided what she thought of you before you opened your mouth. She looked at Denise when they walked in. Really looked at her. Not at her clothes or her hair or her shoes. At her eyes. At the way she carried herself. "So," Robert's mother said, "you're Denise." "I am," Denise said, extending her hand. Firm. Confident. Not a tremor. "Robert hasn't told me much about you. Then I suppose this weekend is the perfect chance to change that." Robert's mother studied her for a beat. Then the smallest smile crossed her face. "I think I'm going to like you." And from that moment Denise was in. She moved through that house like she belonged there. Not because she was pretending, but because she refused to be out of place. She talked to Robert's uncles about economics and held her own. She debated one of his older relatives about global politics and didn't back down once. She was sharp. She was warm. She was everything Robert had been hoping she'd be. And Robert watched her from across every room. Quietly. Gratefully. With something building in his chest that he didn't have a name. Saturday. The ceremony. The church was stunning. Flowers everywhere. Candles. The kind of setup that cost more than most people's cars. And at the altar stood Alex, looking sharp in his suit, looking confident, looking like a man who had everything figured out. And walking down the aisle toward him was Chelsea. She was beautiful. There was no denying that. She wore a dress that cost a fortune and moved like she knew exactly how stunning she looked in it. Every eye in that church was on her, including Robert's. He sat in his pew, rigid. Denise beside him, and she could feel it coming off him in waves.
The pain.
The betrayal. The memory of everything Chelsea had meant to him, sitting right there in front of him, choosing someone else. Denise leaned over. Very quietly. "Breathe," she whispered. "I'm right here." Robert exhaled. His hand found hers under the pew. And he held on. During the reception, Chelsea found them. Of course she did. She drifted over with that smile on her face, the one that was designed to make people uncomfortable, and looked at Denise like she was sizing her up. "Robert," Chelsea said. "You look well." "Chelsea," Robert said. Flat. Polite. Nothing more. Chelsea's eyes moved to Denise. "And who is this?" Denise smiled.
Warm.
Easy. Like she had all the time in the world.
Denise.
"I'm Robert's girlfriend." Something shifted in Chelsea's expression. Just a flicker. "How lovely. How long have you two been together?" 3 months, Denise said, and she squeezed Robert's hand. "It's been really good." Chelsea held Denise's gaze for a second too long. Then she smiled that smile again and drifted away. Robert let out a breath he didn't know he'd been holding. "You okay?" Denise asked. "Yeah," he said. And then, quieter. "Thank you." They danced that night. Not because anyone was watching, just because the music was playing and they wanted to be close. Robert held her like she was something precious. And Denise let him. And neither of them talked about what it meant. Not yet. And then came the moment. Sunday morning. Everyone was relaxed. The wedding was over. The family was spread out across the estate, enjoying the day. Denise had wandered into a small sitting room off the main hall. A cozy room with bookshelves that stretched from floor to ceiling. The kind of room that made her feel instantly at home. She ran her fingers along the spines. Old books. Beautiful books. And then one caught her eye. Tucked between 2 leather-bound classics, a worn paperback. Russian. She pulled it out. Turned it over in her hands. A novel. Classic Russian literature. The pages were yellowed. Someone had loved this book for a long time. Denise sat down in the armchair by the window, opened it, and started reading. She didn't know how long she'd been sitting there when Robert's mother walked in. The older woman stopped in the doorway. Her eyes went to the book in Denise's hands, then to Denise's lips, moving slightly as she read. And something flickered across Robert's mother's face.
Surprise.
Delight. Something close to joy. "You read Russian," she said. Denise looked up, startled. Then she smiled. "My grandmother was from St. Petersburg. She taught me when I was young. I haven't read in Russian in a while, actually. This book is beautiful." "Whose is it?" Robert's mother walked over and sat in the chair beside her. "It was mine. From when I was a girl."
She paused.
"No one in this family reads Russian anymore. Everyone thinks it's old-fashioned." "It's not old-fashioned," Denise said. "It's a bridge. It connects you to where you came from." Robert's mother looked at her for a long time. Then she reached over and patted Denise's hand. "Keep the book, dear. I think it found the right person." Denise's eyes filled with tears. She quickly blinked away. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." The family dinner on Sunday was long and loud and wonderful. Stories about the family. Laughter.
Wine.
And Denise fit right in. But it was later that night when everything changed. Their room was beautiful. A large bed, soft sheets, a window that looked out over the gardens. And Robert, true to form, grabbed a blanket and sat up on the couch. "Robert," Denise said, "the bed is huge. You don't have to sleep on that thing. I don't want to make you uncomfortable." "You're not. You haven't been. Not once this entire weekend." But he stayed on the couch anyway. And Denise let him. She understood. There were lines. And even though this weekend had been complicated, in ways neither of them had expected, she respected the lines he drew. But at 2 a.m., neither of them could sleep. "Robert," Denise whispered into the dark. "Yeah. Can we just talk?" A pause. Then the sound of him sitting up, moving. And then he was sitting on the edge of the bed, close enough to talk but far enough to be safe, and they just talked. Robert told her about his father. How he died when Robert was 12. How his mother had cried exactly once, the night it happened, and never again. How she'd taken everything they had and turned it into something that could protect her family forever. How Robert had grown up watching her be strong and wondering if he'd ever be brave enough to be even half as vulnerable as she was that one night. I think that's why relationships are so hard for me, he said. I never learned how to let someone in, because letting someone in means they can hurt you. And I watched my mother get hurt in the worst possible way. Denise was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Can I tell you something? Something I haven't told anyone." Anything. And she told him. About losing her job. About the shame of it. About watching Betty pay her rent and feeling like she was disappearing. About how this gig, this one weird, unexpected gig, was the first time in months she'd felt like herself again. "My parents were good people," she said. "Normal people. They worked hard their whole lives and they were happy with what they had. But I always wanted more. Not more money. More purpose. More meaning. And when I lost my job, I felt like I'd proven that I wasn't cut out for any of it." "Denise," Robert said, "you walked into a stranger's family weekend and charmed every single person in this house. You debated my uncle on economics and won. My mother gave you a book that she's kept for 40 years. You are the furthest thing from someone who isn't cut out for it." Denise's eyes were wet. She laughed softly, wiping her face. "This is supposed to be fake, you know." "I know," Robert said. "So, why does it feel like the most real conversation I've ever had?" Robert didn't answer, but he reached over in the dark and took her hand, and they sat like that for a long time, holding hands, listening to the quiet, feeling something they both knew was there, but weren't ready to name. Not yet. Monday would come, and with it, the end, or so they thought. Monday morning came too fast. The drive back to Denise's apartment was quiet. Not uncomfortable quiet. The kind of quiet that happens when two people have said so much that words feel unnecessary. Robert pulled up outside her building, turned off the engine, and they sat there for a moment, neither of them moving. "So," Robert said. "So," Denise said. A pause. "Thank you," Robert said. "For this weekend. For everything. You were incredible." "You too," Denise said. And then, because she could feel something rising in her chest that she didn't trust, she opened the door. "Take care of yourself, Robert." She stepped out, closed the door gently, walked toward the building without looking back. Because if she looked back, she knew she wouldn't leave. Robert sat in the gull wing for a long time after she disappeared inside, staring at the door she'd walked through, gripping the steering wheel. Then he drove away. 2 days. Robert lasted exactly 2 days. He couldn't sleep. He couldn't work. He sat in his office staring at numbers on a screen and seeing nothing but her face. The way she'd laughed at dinner that first night. The way she'd held his hand at the wedding. The way she'd looked at him in the dark on Sunday night and asked, "Why does this feel like the most real conversation I've ever had?" He kept picking up his phone, putting it down, picking it up again. On Wednesday afternoon, he grabbed his keys and drove to her apartment. He didn't call. He didn't text. He just showed up, knocked on the door. And when Denise opened it, she was in sweats and an old t-shirt, her hair pulled back, no makeup. She looked tired. She looked like she hadn't slept either. When she saw him, her whole face changed. Surprise. Relief. Something close to joy. "Robert, I can't stop thinking about you," he said. It came out faster than he meant it to. "I know this was supposed to be a job. I know the weekend is over. But Denise, I have not been able to think about anything else for 2 days. And I don't want to. I want to take you on a real date. Not a performance. Not a script. Just us. Just dinner. Just being together. For real." Denise stared at him. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she stepped aside. "Do you want to come in?" They sat on her couch. Her small, worn Brooklyn couch. And for the first time, Robert saw her space. Her world. The books everywhere. The mismatched mugs. The photos of her and Betty on the fridge. It was small, and it was messy, and it was the most real place Robert had ever been in. "I have to tell you something," Denise said. "Okay. When Betty first told me about this, I thought it would be easy. Just a dinner.
Just money."
And then I'd go home, and it would be done.
She paused.
But somewhere between that restaurant and Sunday night, I stopped acting. I don't know exactly when it happened. But at some point, everything I said to you, everything I felt, it wasn't part of the job anymore." Robert looked at her. "I've been miserable for 2 days, Robert," she said, and her voice cracked just a little. "And I didn't expect that. I didn't expect you." He reached for her hand, held it the same way he had on Sunday night. Gently, like it mattered. "So let's stop pretending," he said. "Let's just see what this is. No money. No contract. No family watching. Just you and me." Denise smiled through the tears she was trying very hard to hide. "Okay," she said. "Okay.
"Yeah, okay."
Let's do it." And this time, when they smiled at each other, it was real. All of it. Every single bit of it. And so it began. The real thing. Their first real date was nothing fancy. A small Italian place down the street. The kind of spot where the candles are cheap and the pasta is incredible and nobody cares if you stay too long. They talked for hours. About everything. About nothing. About the way the light hit the table. About a movie they'd both seen as kids. About what they wanted their lives to look like in 5 years. Then came the cinema dates. Robert loved terrible horror movies. Denise was terrified of them. Absolutely, completely terrified. "Why would anyone voluntarily watch this?" she hissed, hiding her face in his shoulder during one particularly gruesome scene. "Because it's fun," Robert whispered back, grinning. "This is not fun. This is psychological warfare." But she kept going back. Every weekend. Because being scared next to Robert felt better than being comfortable anywhere else. They went to museums. Robert would stand in front of a painting and get this look on his face, this quiet, reverent look, like he was having a conversation with it. And Denise would watch him instead of the art, because watching him be passionate about something was more beautiful than anything on the wall. Robert cooked for her.
Badly.
Disastrously. The smoke alarm went off twice in one dinner. He burned the chicken. He oversalted the pasta. He somehow managed to make a salad taste wrong. But Denise ate every bite. And laughed. And told him it was the best meal she'd ever had. And meant it. Because it wasn't about the food. It was about the fact that he tried. That he wanted to do something with his own hands for her. That he cared enough to fail, over and over, just to make her smile. One night, after dinner and wine and a conversation that had wandered from philosophy to childhood memories to the meaning of happiness, they were sitting on his couch. The TV was on, but neither of them was watching it. And Robert looked at her, and she looked at him, and the space between them just closed. Their first kiss was quiet.
Soft.
The kind of kiss that feels less like something new and more like something that was always supposed to happen. Like coming home to a place you didn't know you'd been missing. When they pulled apart, Denise laughed.
Just a small, happy laugh.
"What?" Robert asked. "Nothing," she said. I'm really glad Betty was too busy to take that date." Robert smiled. "Me too."
Now.
While Robert and Denise were building something real, something beautiful, something that neither of them expected, Alex and Chelsea were building something else entirely. Something hollow. Because here's the truth about Alex and Chelsea that nobody knew. Not really. Chelsea didn't fall in love with Alex. Chelsea fell in love with what Alex represented. Money. Status. A lifestyle. The kind of life where you don't look at price tags and you summer in places other people can only dream about. Alex, for his part, was genuinely in love with Chelsea. Or at least he thought he was. He was charmed by her. Dazzled by her. She was beautiful and confident, and she paid attention to him in a way that made him feel important. He didn't see what was underneath it.
He didn't want to.
And Alex didn't know something that nobody in the family knew. His father had been gambling. Not casually. Not the occasional poker night. Seriously. Heavily. For years. The kind of gambling that eats through fortunes quietly, invisibly, until one day there's nothing left. Alex's inheritance, the money that was supposed to be his, the trust fund that his father had been managing, was gone. All of it. Gambled away in private rooms and high-stakes games that no one talked about. But Alex didn't know that. Not yet. His father kept it quiet, kept up appearances, kept telling Alex that everything was fine, that the money was there, that the family was solid. So Alex lived like it was true. He spent freely. He bought Chelsea things. He threw a wedding that cost $200,000 because that's what Chelsea wanted, and Alex wanted to give her everything she wanted, because that's what you do when you love someone. Or think you do. The wedding was gorgeous. Extravagant. The kind of event that made people whisper and take photos and post on social media. Chelsea looked like a princess. Alex looked like a man who had the world at his feet. But it was the last of it. The very last of what remained. And nobody knew. Not Chelsea. Not Alex. Not anyone at that wedding except the lawyers, who were waiting. It was about a month after the wedding when the letter arrived. Alex opened it at the kitchen table while Chelsea was getting ready to go shopping. Again. She went shopping almost every day now. New bags. New shoes. New dresses. The credit cards were stacking up and Alex kept paying them off because that's what you do, right? That's what a husband does. The letter was from the family's lawyer. Alex read it twice. Then a third time. Then he sat very still for a very long time. His father had gambled away everything. The trust fund. The investments. The properties that were supposed to be Alex's.
Gone.
All of it. The $200,000 wedding, the honeymoon, the deposits on the apartment they were renting, all of it had come from the last scraps of what was left. There was nothing. Alex sat at that table for an hour before Chelsea came back, designer bags in hand, and asked why he looked so pale. He told her. Chelsea's face went through several stages. Confusion first. Then disbelief. Then something that looked a lot like anger. What do you mean there's no money? I mean my father gambled it all away. There's nothing left, Chelsea. Nothing. But your family, my family on my father's side. That money is gone. Robert's mother, Robert's side, that's separate. That's always been separate. Chelsea put down the shopping bags, very slowly. So, when you say nothing, you mean nothing. I mean nothing. She looked at him for a long time, and in that look, Alex saw something he'd been too blind, too in love, too trusting to see before. He saw the calculation, the math, the way Chelsea's mind was already running numbers. Okay, she said, very calmly.
Okay.
We'll figure it out. But they didn't figure it out. Alex tried. He really did. He sold a few paintings from the family collection, the ones that were actually his to sell. He picked up extra work. He cut back on expenses, tried to explain to Chelsea that they needed to be more careful. Chelsea did not want to be more careful. Chelsea wanted the life she married into. The shopping. The restaurants. The trips. The feeling of being someone who had everything. And when that feeling started to slip away, when the credit card bills started piling up faster than Alex could pay them, when the reality of their situation started closing in, Chelsea started pulling away.
First it was little things. She stopped asking about his day.
She spent more time on her phone. She started going out with her friends instead of staying home with him. Then it was bigger things. Arguments about money. Every single night. Chelsea wanted things Alex couldn't give her anymore. And every time he tried to explain, every time he said, "We need to slow down," Chelsea heard something different. She heard, "I can't give you what you want. I can't be what you need. I'm not enough." And maybe in her mind, that was true. For months into the marriage, Chelsea packed a bag. Alex watched her from the bedroom doorway. He didn't try to stop her. He was too tired, too heartbroken, too aware of what this really was. "Chelsea," he said. She didn't look up. She was folding clothes with sharp, precise movements. "This isn't what you signed up for," Alex said. It wasn't an accusation. It was just the truth. Chelsea paused, just for a second, and then she zipped the bag and picked it up and walked past him without a word. The door closed behind her, and Alex was alone. 3 months after that wedding, the dust had settled. The truth had come out. Alex's situation was no longer a secret. The family knew. The friends knew. The society pages knew. Alex had lost everything. Chelsea had left. And the grand, beautiful wedding that had started it all was just a memory of a life that never really existed. But Robert? Robert had gained everything. Not money. Not status. Not any of the things the world tells you matter. Robert had found someone who saw him.
Really saw him.
Not the investor. Not the quiet guy with the glasses. Not the nerd. But him. The man underneath all of it. The man who carried his father's car like a piece of his heart. The man who burned dinner but kept trying. The man who held her hand in the dark and said the truest things he'd ever said. And Denise had found something too. She'd found a man who didn't need her to be anything other than exactly who she was. Who challenged her. Who listened to her. Who looked at her like she was the most interesting person in any room. She got the new job. A better one. On her own. Robert didn't pull any strings. He didn't even know anyone at the company. It was all her. And when she told him, she was crying, and he picked her up and spun her around and said, "I knew you would. I always knew." So, here's the thing about love that this story taught me. Love doesn't always show up the way you expect it to. Sometimes it doesn't show up at all until you stop looking for it. Sometimes it shows up disguised as a job, as a transaction, as something that's supposed to be temporary and meaningless. But it finds you anyway. Denise walked into that restaurant looking for $5,000. She walked out of it walking toward the rest of her life. Robert hired a date for a wedding and found the person he was meant to be with. And Alex learned the hardest lesson of all, that the people who love you for what you have will disappear the moment it's gone. But the people who love you for who you are, they stay. That's the difference. That's always been the difference. And that, my loves, is the story of Denise and Robert. But here's the thing. I have so much more. What happens when Robert's mother finds out the truth about how they really met? What happens when Denise and Robert take the next step? And what about Betty? Does she ever find her own love story? If you want to know, let me know in the comments. Tell me if you want part 2. I need to hear from you. And please, tell me what time it is where you are. Tell me where you're watching from. Someone right now is watching this at breakfast in Tokyo. Someone is watching this on their lunch break in London. Someone is watching this before bed in New York. And we are all here, together, believing in the same thing. If this story moved you, hit subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to hear it tonight. Someone who needs to be reminded that love is real. That it's messy and unexpected, and sometimes it starts in the strangest places. Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing. I love you all.
Until next time.